In this video, I'm going to show you skills you need to know if you are going to complete your Excel Expert 77728 exam. These skills include knowing when and how to use logical functions such as the and/or functions, how to create and manage pivot tables, and how to use advanced functions such as the embedded if functions and the DATEDIF functions, so you can demonstrate how overpaid and terrible the Toronto Maple Leafs hockey team is. Hi there, my name is Mike from Mike's Office, the YouTube channel that aims to offer you effective Microsoft training so that you can save time, feel confident, and get the results you want. So this will be Project 1 in our Excel Expert MOS exam test review. Project 1, thought we'd start off pretty simple. The first task is going to ask us to use the fill series options in Excel to fill assignments 2 through 7 in cells C19 to H19, and we're not going to change the cell formatting. So I guess the only tricky part there is just the wording. They want you to fill this series, so I'm going to grab the fill handle, and you could do this in a few ways that wouldn't be wrong. But I think this is the easiest. Just grab the fill handle, and you're going to notice that the formatting changes, and it says specifically do not change that. So we have to go an extra step and click on the autofill options drop arrow, and then fill without formatting. So pretty straightforward for that first one. The second task is going to ask us to remove all of the conditional formatting from the student scores worksheet. So that's pretty straightforward as well. You just go to, in the Home tab, click the conditional formatting drop arrow. And when we go to clear rules, you'll notice there's two options, from selected cells and from the entire sheet. That's the one they want if you read the question. So we say clear rules from the entire sheet, and you should see those red formatted cells disappear when we click that. And then it did. So we've done step number 2. The third task is going to ask us to navigate to a different worksheet, and then we're going to add a slicer for the student ID column. So it's basically asking us to, if you use a lot of pivot tables, you'll know that a slicer is basically like this interactive remote control that lets you filter out data visually. So let's go to that worksheet and we'll see how it's done. So if we click on this pivot table, anywhere, it doesn't matter. And then we go over to the Insert tab, and there's the option here to add a slicer. And then you just have to choose the column that they're asking for. So it says in the student ID column, so we want to highlight that one and press OK. And here's our little slicer, and it didn't tell us to put it anywhere, but I'm just going to move it away from the chart in case we have to alter the chart in any way. And that's step 3. So task 4 is now going to ask us to save the pivot chart as a template named assignment 1 chart in the documents folder. So to do that, we're going to click on this chart, make sure it's activated. And then I think the easiest way to do this is to right click on it, right click, and then scroll up to save as template. So that's just like, you'd want to do this if you like the design of your chart and you want to save that kind of design for later. You could do that. So I'm going to save it to my documents folder, and we're going to name this assignment 1 chart, all one word. So remember, when you see that underline on your exam, that means they want you to type exactly what's in the underline and don't add the quotations around it. All right, so assignment 1 chart, and we're going to click save, and that's it for step 4. Our last step for project 1 is going to ask us to display the developer tab on our Excel ribbon. So that just means it doesn't matter which worksheet you're in, it's in the file tab. And this little tab is going to allow us to do some more advanced stuff in Excel. But all I want us to do in this step, or if you have something like this on your exam, is to just display the tab or open it up on your ribbon. So we're going to click in the File tab, we're going to go to the Options, and this would be under Customize Ribbon. And then we just click the Developer box and press OK, and you should see it pop up right here. And that's it for step 5. So for project 2, task 1, we're going to modify Excel options to prevent formulas from being automatically evaluated when data changes. So that part's pretty straightforward. The second part's a little bit trickier. Formulas should not be evaluated when your workbook is saved. So to get to that first part of this task, we're going to click the file in the ribbon, and then we're going to look for options and click on that. In the Excel options, we're going to choose the Formulas tab. And then in the calculation options, we're going to check the option manual. So that covers the first part. Now here's the tricky part about the second part of that task. There are 2 different conditions about the option under manual. If you check the option recalculate workbook before saving. The next time you open the workbook, the formulas will not recalculate. If you make no change to the workbook and close it, the formula will not recalculate and you will not see the information. But if you save the workbook manually, even if you still make no change to the file, the formula will recalculate and then save. So we actually don't want to check on that. We want the unchecked option, which will not recalculate when you open the workbook, and when you save the workbook, the corresponding formula will not recalculate. So that's the one we want. So you actually want to leave that box unchecked and just click manual. So for the second task, thanks to hockeyreference.com, I was able to gather some information on the top 35 the highest paid hockey players in the National Hockey League. And task 2 is going to ask us to take that information. We're going to create a pivot table with it and then put that information with the pivot table on a different worksheet. And then we're going to decide, we're going to show the average salary for each position that they play. So my sneaking suspicion is that centermen who take the face-off in hockey, who do a little bit more work than their other teammates, I think, will get paid a little bit more on average. So we'll see if that's true by creating a pivot table. So I'm going to first highlight the information starting from A1 to F35. And then I'm going to click on the Insert tab in our ribbon here. And then on the left, click Pivot Table. Now there's two options with Pivot Table. You could create a completely new worksheet, or the question's asking us to put it in an already existing worksheet. So we have to click Existing Worksheet and then press this up arrow. Click on the actual worksheet that they want and the location where they want the pivot table, which is in A2. And you can kind of see the formula here for the worksheet and the cell reference that we're going to put it in. And then I'll just click that arrow again. And that's all we have to do when we press OK. And this is going to create a little placeholder for our pivot table. Now the first thing we have to do is get the salary here on the pivot table field. So the salary is going to come up as grand total or a sum, but we can change it to average by going to the drop arrow and then clicking on value field settings and just change that to the average salary and then press OK. And now we want to click on the position because we want to see what the players get paid on average by the position that they play on the team. And that automatically goes to the rows, and that's exactly what we want. And if you notice, I was right about the centermans on average based on the top 35 players. On average, those top 35 players get paid a little bit more than a left winger does, just slightly more, not too much more. But yeah, so that's how we complete step 2. So for step 3, we're going to stay on the current worksheet and change the settings for the pivot table to refresh the data of the pivot table whenever the file is open. So when we add new entries, the numbers should get updated and change the pivot table numbers as well. So the way we're going to do this is right click any cell in the pivot table, and then we're going to click Pivot Table Options. In the Pivot Table Options window, we're going to click the Data tab, and then in the Pivot Table Data section, add a check mark to the Refresh Data when opening the file option. And then we're going to click OK to close the dialog box. So step 4 is going to ask us to take a range of cells A2 to F5 on the NHL Players worksheet and then add it to the watch window. And the watch window is basically where you can pull out important cells into a separate window and keep track of them there, which saves you from having to scroll all over your worksheet. So to add the cells A2 to F5 to the watch window, I'm going to highlight that range of cells first. And then on the Formulas tab in the Formula Auditing group, we're going to click Watch Window. And then click the button Add Watch. And then click Add. And there it is in the watch window. So if we were to come back to this or exit and then come back, that group of cells would be saved in our watch window, just in case we added more data on top of that and it got pushed down to the end of the worksheet or something like that. So task 5 is going to ask us to go to cell B6 on the About Last Week worksheet, and then we're going to add a formula in that cell using a logical function to display true if all of the players who got paid way too much scored at least one goal in the last week, and false even if one player did not score a goal last week. So even if one player didn't score, then all of these overpaid athletes are not worth it. So not worth the money they're paid. Anyways, the big tip off here in what what function to use here is the statement to display true if all. Now, for logical functions, you could use the and or the or function, but here's what gives it away. The and function returns true if all of the arguments are true, versus the or function, which returns true if any one of them is true. So because it says to display true if all, that tips you off and tells you that it's the and function we need. So we're going to type in equal and, open bracket, and then I'm going to click on each one and say greater than 0, and then separate them with a comma, and then keep going down for those. This would be difficult if you had a large number of people, but because it's a small sample size, this tends to work. And B5 lastly has to be greater than 0 as well. And then I'm going to close the bracket and then press enter, and it should say false because in 4 games, Mitchell Marner did not score a goal. So that's not someone who's getting paid over 10 million. That's not what they should do. But anyways, if you want to test, now I wouldn't suggest testing a function on the exam because that's just too time consuming. But just for logical sake, if you want to see if this works, if we type in 1, if we've done this correctly, the function should correct itself and, convert to true, because that would mean all arguments were met. All right, so if all of them have to be true for this to be true, that's an and function. And then if they're not all true, then it's false, again, with the and function, versus the or function that returns the true value if even one of them is true. So for project 3, task 1, it's going to ask us to insert our pointer in the cell 3 of the championship worksheet and add a formula that uses a single function to look up the team abbreviation in the abbreviation worksheet for the team listed in cell B3, which is the Ottawa Senators, in the champions worksheet. So we're going to look up the abbreviation name for this team, the Ottawa Senators, and we're going to get that information from the abbreviation worksheet. Now you'll notice this is a vertical table. So if you're thinking a lookup function that has a vertical table, that's a Vlookup, and we need 3 parts to this. The lookup value, so the lookup value is the team name, and the next part is the actual table or structured range of data. This is this one right here, and the column numbers. So the information that we're missing, or the abbreviation, is in column B here. And if this was a table, if A was column 1 starting from the left and going to the right, B would be column 2. So we have those three pieces of information, and we're going to plug those into the Vlookup formula. So I'm going to type equal Vlookup in our cell C3 of the champions worksheet, and then I'm gonna open our insert function dialog box by typing the formula and then clicking the insert function button here. And that's gonna make it easy for us to understand what exactly we need. So the lookup value is right here, the Ottawa Senators. And the table array is on the abbreviation. It doesn't have to be technically, it's not really a table. And we're just gonna highlight all of the information here, even though it's a structured range, not a table. Now the difference between a structured range and a table is that if you gave the table a name and referred to that, if you were to copy the formula down, it would work that way, but this one's not going to work unless we hold on to it by pressing F4 around the range. So I'm going to do that just so we can hold on to it, and just in case you ever wanted to copy that formula down later. But technically the test doesn't ask us to do that, so maybe you could get away with not doing that on this one. But just for real life purposes, if you were trying to hold on to that table, you'd press F4. But maybe on your test, I would probably avoid clicking F4 on that one. Okay, but it's not wrong. So anyways, the column index, like we said before, it's the second column to the right, so it's actually number 2. And you should see kind of a preview of what it's going to tell you, and the OTT for Ottawa is correct. And when we press OK, it should give us exactly what we need. So that would be the end of that step, and I wouldn't suggest testing it on your test, but if you wanted to test it to the next few, you could, and you see the short forms of those teams come up. So we've done number 1 correctly. So task 2 is going to ask us to prevent users from adding, deleting, or modifying worksheets unless they enter the password go leaves go. So that's the password we're going to type in. The challenging part about this is knowing what password option to choose because there's many in Excel. So let's go over to our File tab and we'll click on it. And then if you click on the Info tab here, there's an option for protecting the workbook. And this is sort of the challenging part, is deciding what option we should choose. So encrypting the whole workbook with a password would mean that it gets people at the beginning of the worksheet, even before they open it or their workbook, to enter a password. And that's not exactly what the question is asking. It's asking us to prevent users from adding, deleting, or modifying the worksheets. And if you look at this sort of definition of what protecting a workbook structure is, it says prevent unwanted changes to the structure of a workbook, such as adding sheets. But you can also add in there, it won't let users delete or modify sheets. So that's actually the one we want here, protect workbook structure. So we're going to choose that versus encrypting the password, which won't even allow people to open the workbook without a password. So, and this is protect workbook structure is more what the question is asking us to do. And then we can just type in the password. On your test, you're actually allowed to copy and paste too, but just in case, I'm going to type the letters here exactly how they are without the quotation marks. So it's go, leaves, go, all one word, lowercase, and it's just going to protect the structure, not the windows. So I'm going to say OK. And then re-enter the password just to make sure we didn't mess that up. So go, leaves, go as one word. And then as long as everything's okay, now we've protected our worksheets from being, from other people adding worksheets, deleting the current ones, or modifying them in any way. So task 3 is going to ask us to go to the recent wins worksheet. And then in G3, we're going to put in a formula that will show if the team listed in column B, or more specifically cell B3, scored or ranked in the top 10 for both goals ranked and goals against. So how many goals you scored versus how many goals you let in. If the team scored better than like ranked 10th in the league for both of those, we're going to display the word expected. And then, because if you have a championship team, you kind of expect they're both good at offense and defense. And if that's not the case, then you get not expected if the team doesn't rank better than 10 in both, how many goals they scored and how many goals they allowed. So the way you would do this, it's a little bit of a mix. And the clue here is that there's values expected and not expected that go outside of the true or false. And there's two outcomes. So that screams if function, but there's also another part of this. There's another layer to this. So there's an if function, but also an embedded and function, because there's more, it has to meet for the true statement, the expected part. Two conditions have to be true. They have to the rank within the top 10 for both goals for and goals against. So it's an if and function, and I'll show you what that looks like. So in cell G3, I'm going to start typing our function equal if, open bracket, and then I'm going to start typing and I'm going to select the and function here by double clicking. Our logical one is, so it has to be, there's two conditions here. Logical one is that this one is less than or equal to 10. Okay, so it has to rank within the top 10, which would make it like anywhere 1 through 10 is fine. And then this one also has to rank for goals against. They have to rank in the top 10. So less than. Okay, so both are true. They're both less than 10. That makes sense. But we're not done there. That's just the first part. So that's our, if we go back to this, so if I click here on the if function, that's our logical test. And that works because both are true. So both the Washington Capitals were ranked within the top 10 teams for both goals scored and goals against. And this is pretty straightforward now. We just type in the two, how did they, expected here. So we just type out expect, you should put quotations around it. I think if you forget, the dialog box would do it for you anyway, but you really should, if you're doing a text value, put quotations around it. The quotations won't show up, so it's okay. Not with a capital N, not expected. And then put quotations in. I didn't put a quotation before, that's why it's not working, and now We have everything we need, and the value should be expected because you can look and see that the Washington Capitals definitely finished within the top 10 for both goals scored and goals allowed. Okay, and you can even test this because some teams didn't meet this criteria. Although, again, this is just me having a little bit of fun with this. I wouldn't do this on the test. If they're asked you to just put it in G3, leave it at that. But let's test to see if we did this correctly. And we see that the Pittsburgh Penguins, even though their defense wasn't great, their offense is, and that won them the championship. So it's not true what they say that defense wins championships, not all the time. Yeah, so not expected. That wasn't expected, not expected. Task 4 is going to ask us to navigate our way to the champions worksheet, and then in cell D43, we're going to calculate using the date and time functions to show how many years ago it was that my favorite team won. So this is the last time they won back in 1967, and we want to calculate easily how many years it's been since then, which is a lot. I don't know why I cheer for this team still, but anyways, the way you would do that, you need 3 things. You need the previous date, 1967, today's date, and also whether you want to show the elapsed time in days, months, or years. And in our case, we want to show the years. So we have to do the DATEDIF function, so equal DATEDIF, and then we'll put in the date here. And then I'll separate that with a comma and then type in today as if you're going to do the today function. But then I'm just going to do open bracket, close bracket, and then separate that with a comma. And this is where we choose whether we want to show the elapsed time in days, months, or years. Days would be D, months would be M, and years would be a Y. So you would write it like this: quotations, Y, end of quotations, and then end bracket. And if I press enter, it shows that we've done, it's been 53 years since they won last, such a long time ago. And that is it for step 4. So for task 1 on project 4, we're going to go to a PivotChart worksheet and then add the region field as a filter to the PivotChart. So if you've used PivotCharts before, this is pretty straightforward, but if you're new to this, you'd have to activate the chart first, and then you get this PivotChart field. And then we could click here to add the region, but it's better to drag it down to the filters because if we click here, it goes into the axis or categories. So we have to create a filter, and they want the region filter. So we're going to move the region group here down to filters, and now we could filter out which region we wanted to see in the pivot chart. So in task 2, we're going to navigate our way to cell B363 of the sales data worksheet, and then we're going to calculate the total number of sales from Colorado and ones that are less than $10,000. So the first thing to do would be navigate to that cell instead of scrolling down all the way. So just type in B363 in the name box and press enter, and that should take us to this cell. And now we're going to calculate 2 things. So instead of, before we did the AND function to calculate 2 things that are true, now we're going to use a function called the CountIF, and we know we have to use the CountIF because it says it's the total number. So the total number, not like the total sales, which would be sum. This is a CountIF because it's counting the total number, but it's not just a singular CountIF, it's the plural one, so it's CountIFs with an S at the end. So that'll allow us to count, use a CountIF in 2 ways, or more than 2 ways. You could do more than 2 ways, but we're just using 2. If it's more than 1, you have to use CountIFs. So go inside the insert function dialog box. The first range is column B, where all the 3 different regions are placed, and we're going to start in cell B1 and go all to the way to the bottom. You could put the column B continuously, but that would run into actually where we're putting our current formula, so that wouldn't work. So we have to stop it at B361, or yep, B361. Okay, so it's going to look through that. That's our criteria range, and then we're going to look for the word Colorado. And I saw some entries up there, so you know you spelled it wrong if nothing comes out here, but it did. 120 text values have Colorado in them, so that's our first condition. And then the second one, we're going to look through the sales or the numbers in column E. So I'm going to start in E1, and just like this one, it's going to go all the way to E361. So row 361E, column E, and then in that column we're looking for values that are less than 10,000. So that way we're looking for the sales in Colorado and also the values that are less than 10,000. We're just going to count how many there are, and there's 20. So that's how you would complete task 2. So task 3 is going to ask us to remove the name sales region from the range A2 to E361. So that was the range we were just covering on the current worksheet. So to name cells, you can go to the Formulas tab and go to the Name Manager. But we're going to actually delete this name for that range. So we're going to click on the sales region and then delete that name for that range. And then we're going to press OK, and then we've deleted it from the Name Manager. For task 4, we'll navigate to the percent of sales pivot chart worksheet, and then we're going to create a pivot chart based on the information from the pivot table here. So I can click anywhere inside of that pivot table and then just click the Insert tab, and then we want to choose a pivot chart, and we want to specifically choose one that's a 3D stacked bar. So it's in the bar, and then this looks like the 3D stacked bar. And then we just press OK, and there's our sort of pivot chart. I'll just move this over to a free area here. And that's it for task 4. For more effective Microsoft training so that you can save time, feel confident, and get the results you want, click on any of these videos for more Excel Expert projects.